Hello and welcome back to the OddsNow YouTube channel. It's me, Matt Hill, joined by Brad Walker, and we're here for a boxing preview, looking ahead to this weekend's domestic clash between Dereck Chisora and Joyce, two British fighters, arguably on the decline. Certainly looks like a fight that could be catastrophic for the loser, and you could be even arguing that Dereck Chisora maybe is doing well to be still in these kind of fights. But there we are. We'll come on to that. Brad is our expert in the boxing field, and he's going to be running us through this fight. Brad, just to start then, does this fight get your juices flowing, or is this a little bit of a I'm going to watch it, but I'm not that excited? How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's going to have me on the edge of my seat, Matt, to be honest with you, just because of where both of them are, the stages of their career. You've mentioned Chisora there. We'll go into that in more depth later on in the video, but, I think let's just say I don't think anyone would have complained if he had decided to hang up the gloves a couple of years back. I don't think anyone has the right ever to tell a fighter they should retire, but he has taken a lot of damage and punishment over the years now, and a lot of his fights have made for an uncomfortable watch. I was there in person when he fought Joseph Parker a couple of years ago in Manchester, and it was almost, watching through your fingers kind of thing. It was that uncomfortable, the amount of shots that he was taking. Joyce, until recently, was on a roll, but then he runs into Zhilei Zhang again. We'll run through that in a moment. I wouldn't say now. I don't think any people are looking forward to this fight as a whole. I think there are some good fights on the undercard, but I think the amount of damage these two have taken throughout their career, I think people are almost find it as an uncomfortable fight heading into Saturday.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a big one for Joyce, I suppose, who was, like you say, only got those two losses to Zhilei Zhang in his record, and prior to those losses, was probably one of the most avoided men in the heavyweight realm, really, and it looked destined to be headlining cards. You touched on it before we came on air. On Saudi Arabia, he would have been eyeing those big prize money fights, but as it is now, he finds himself having to rebuild his career, and he's not exactly a fountain of youth either. Joyce, not got time on his side, so these kind of fights, I suppose he needs to take care of business and do it quite quickly and effectively. Chisora lost 4 of his last 6 fights, as you say, and we all have our concerns over how much longer Derek's going to go on. He's been a brilliant fighter for British boxing, but he's taken a lot of punishment, as you touch on. Joyce, a 2-9 favourite coming into this fight then, and Chisora out at 4-1. I suppose Dereck would argue that he's still got that punch power and he can deliver devastating knockouts. We've seen Joyce stopped twice by Zhang. So how are you reading this fight in terms of how it might actually pan out? Joyce to stop Chisora is quite a clear favourite in the method of victory betting. Is that how you see it going?
Possibly. I think there are questions to be asked of Joyce, though. If we look at their recent performances, they both come into the fight on the back of wins. Joyce beating Kashali in his comeback fight with a 10th round, final round knockout in March. Wasn't the most convincing performance from him, let's say. Chisora as well, last time out, beat Gerald Washington over 10 rounds, unanimous decision win in August of last year. You touched on earlier on in the video, Matt, that Joyce is on the cusp of a world title shot. Prior to that first fight with Zhilei Zhang, where he suffered the first defeat of his career, the fight was stopped in round 6 on the advice of the ring doctor due to an injury from Joyce's left eye. He was never renowned for his defense, but even by his standards, he was far too easy to hit that night. Zhang couldn't miss with the straight left down the middle from that southpaw stance, consistently peppering Joyce throughout the fight. The immediate rematch happens, and then Joyce loses even more emphatically. Zhilei Zhang stopped him in round 3, feinting to the body with a jab and then throwing this foot in, right hook over the top. Joyce was unable to make the count. And the man who was, for a long time, marvelled at his chin, many felt it was impossible to knock him out. There was talk of a fight with Deontay Wilder to see if he could really stand up to the Americans' power. Of course, Wilder's faded himself in his last few fights, I think it's fair to say. But Joyce's air of invincibility was destroyed that night. Perhaps it was a result of an accumulation, of the damage he had taken over the years. Like I said, he's always been far too easy to hit. He'd been in an 11-round war with Joseph Parker. I think it was 11 months before the rematch with Zhang. But following that win against Parker, he was inside most people's top 5 heavyweights in the world. Like you said, there weren't people exactly queuing up to fight him. And you mentioned that the timing was very unfortunate because he would have been on those big Saudi Arabian cards, as Zhang was, as a result of his win over Joyce. If he'd have waited just a couple months longer, obviously, of course, hindsight is a wonderful thing. He does need a win here. If he loses here, his career's done. I think it's fair to say that, particularly at the top level, it's over for him. I originally thought that was the case for both fighters, but after further reflection, I'm not sure that is the case with Chisora, as I will discuss later on in the video. But for Joyce, there's no questions about how devastating another loss would be. Your question, how I see it panning out, I think there are questions over Joyce's not only potential physical decline and capacity moving forward. He's not a spring chicken, like you say, but I think there are also questions around his mental capacity now and where he's at psychologically, given the nature of that second defeat to Zhang. The first one you could kind of write off, okay, it was an eye injury, that the fight was stopped on the ringside doctor. I'm sure he could justify to himself, look, if that fight was able to continue, I'd have broke Zhang down, I'd have got to him and I'd have stopped him in the latter stages, as he had done to so many fighters like the likes of Daniel Dubois and Joseph Parker as well. But the second one, he was... The one strength that many always spoke about with Joe Joyce was his chin and his ability to take a shot. That was obliterated that night with the right hand that Zhang landed on him, left him flat on his stomach. He was unable to make the 10 count. It was impressive that he was up as fast as he was, really, even though he didn't make that count, given the nature of the shot and how hard Zhang hits. And Dereck Chisora, look, he's nowhere near the fighter he was. He's a shadow of his former self, and there's no surprise there, given the accumulation that he's taken over the years and the amount of punishment. But he does still have incredible heart and grit, and he will keep moving forward and coming at you unless you can give him reason not to, and you stop him from doing that yourself. And it'll be interesting to see how Joe Joyce handles that, particularly in those earlier rounds, given, like I said, the potential mental scarring in the aftermath of those Zhang defeats. Joe Joyce is rightly in an overwhelming favour. I'm not suggesting Dereck Chisora is going to win here at all. I'd be amazed if that happened. But I think these are some things to consider heading into the fight. And Chisora, like we said, there's no questions over his decline. He's 40 years old, been fighting for 17 years now as a pro, lost 4 of his last 6 fights. Even those 2 wins during that time came against 41-year-olds in Kubrat Pulev and Gerald Washington. And the Pulev fight was very, very close. Some people thought Pulev nicked that. Could have gone either way. There have been calls for him to hang up the gloves. Not sure the sport should even facilitate his career, to be honest with you. I think there are questions to be asked. Those are at the top of the sport that are allowing him to continue fighting, but that's a debate for another day. But he did win his last fight 11 months ago, against Gerald Washington. So I guess there's enough justification there in his mind to continue. But like I said, I originally thought both needed to win this fight, but thinking about it, I don't think Chisora does, because he's already lost 4 of his last 6 and he's still here. So he's popular. He sells a ticket. Those 4 fights that he's lost were convincing, but he's still getting these big nights because of his name. And that's all you need to do in boxing. I'm not saying that's right, but it's certainly the case in boxing. If you sell tickets, you're always going to get given opportunities, no matter the state that you're in. And he's shown no willingness to hang up the gloves either. So I can't say that he does need this win as much as Joyce. But his feet are certainly slower. I'm not going to comment on any potential decline outside of the ring, so I don't think that's fair. But his feet are slower in the ring. He's just not the man that he used to be, 5-10 years ago. And that's to be expected. Boxing's a young man's game. But if Joyce is hesitant and his resistance really has withdrawn, his punch resistance, to the extent seen in that second Zhang fight, then Chisora, I'm sure he could find something of his own to turn the tables. I do think it's unlikely, but the cliche does go that anything can happen in heavyweight boxing. But yeah, I still think it'd be a huge, huge shock if Chisora was to win this one. It's a very long answer there, Matt, but
that's okay. I'll let you off. So yeah, I can kind of see where you're leaning here. I know you can't quite get there with Dereck winning this fight, but you think it might be the days of Joyce sort of getting people out of there quickly may have faded. And I do appreciate what you're saying with Chisora there. Lost 4 of his last 6 fights, but 3 of them were on decisions. He did last the 12 rounds, and we're very used to seeing Chisora being put down in fights multiple times, but he still seems to find a way to get up. His heart and will to carry on is almost unrivaled, to be honest, and you do literally have to physically spark him out to stop him, kind of thing. So with that in mind, the 8-15 about a Joyce stoppage probably doesn't make that much appeal against somebody as battle hardened as Chisora, even though it does feel like the likeliest outcome eventually. So maybe you want to play the rounds betting, I'm sensing.
Yeah, exactly that. That is my best bet. Actually, is for the fight to go over 8.5 plus rounds at the time of recording. That comes in at a best price of 5-4. with Betfred. As touched upon there, neither of the pair are blessed, let's say, with great defensive capabilities. Prior to Zhang, Joyce was renowned for his ability to take a punch. That is no longer the case, of course, given the nature of his second loss to the Chinese heavyweight. And again, doubts do linger over the mental state as well as the physical state of Joe Joyce. But he should still have far too much for Chisora here. But like you said, I don't think there's value in backing him in that. I mean, you've mentioned the prices there. If Chisora was to somehow win, it really, I think it would speak to the extent of Joe Joyce's physical decline. But again, I wouldn't be backing it just because of the prices. I don't think make it worthwhile dropping any money on that. But Chisora has only been stopped. He's lost 13 fights in total throughout his career, but he's only been stopped 4 times during that period. And only one of those came before round 10. That was the 5th round loss to David Haye in 2012. Joyce, I think he could be hesitant early on. Like I said, he wasn't convincing against Cash Ali. And I think he won't want to commit with his feet too early on. I think against Chisora, again, potentially speaking to the mental scarring of that second loss to Zhang. There's no value in backing Joyce to win on his own. But I do expect this one to reach the latter stages, given Chisora's ability. You know, like you said, he does hang in there, even though he loses most of the rounds. He saw him, you know, I think it was 6-7 years ago against Carlos Takam. He'd lost pretty much every round in a war with Takam in London. And then he finds his big right hand to turn the fight on his head. Like I said, I do not see that happening here. But it just speaks to his ability to absorb punishment. He's been doing it for years. And even now, where he is a shadow of his former self, he's continuing to do it. So my best bet will be over 8.5 plus rounds at 5-4 with Betfred. You can also get Joyce to win and the fight to go 8.5 plus rounds. That comes in at 1.7 to 1 with Betfred as well. I think either of those are viable options. It is a difficult fight to find value in just because Joyce is such a strong favourite. But yeah, if I was having to go in any direction, Matt, it would certainly be that one.
Okay, good stuff then. So it's Joe Joyce to win and the fight to go over 8.5 rounds. But over 8.5 rounds on the round betting is the best bet for Brad there, which is coming in at 5-4 or 2.25, depending on your decimal or fraction preference. So there is an undercard, not littered with star names, I think it's fair to say, Brad. But while we're here, we should go through it. And I see that you've put an ACCA together, which I'm going to pull up on the screen at the moment. But first, your best bet on the undercard. Do you want to talk us through that one?
Yeah, you can see the asterisk next to it, just because I've got to be honest with you, if I had to pick a winner from this fight, I probably would go the other way. But I think I'll talk you through the fight first. Like you said, there's some good matchups. Dennis McCann is rematching Iron Baluta, the man whose name is on the screen, following their controversial technical draw in their first fight. It was a great fight to watch. Many felt Baluta should have got the nod. The fight was stopped. I think it was in the 9th round because of a cut to Dennis McCann's head, an accident cut caused by an accidental head clash. So the fight goes to the judges' scorecards. Many felt Baluta should have won that night. It ended up being ruled a draw. The European title was on the line for this fight. Like I said, I'm going to talk through this bet in a minute when I go through the ACCA, but I do think Dennis McCann probably will win it. But I think if you can get Iron at Baluta at 5-2, I think it's very, very good value and could be worth a punt. Baluta, Romanian super bantamweight. He's been over here before many times. He's beaten the likes of Andrew Kane, who was previously undefeated and was being spoken about in glowing terms for his ability just to run through fighters. He got beat that night. He also beaten the likes of Brad Foster, TJ Taheni as well, who is now rumoured to be fighting Naoya Inoue in Japan. You know, Inoue is in many people's eyes the number one pound for pound fighter.
Pound for pound.
Yeah, exactly. And yet Baluta holds a win over Taheni. He's also been in there with the likes of Michael Conlon where he lost. But yeah, he's got some great wins under his belt. And at 5-2, particularly coupling with the nature of their first fight, I think 5-2 with Baluta is worth a punt. Certainly. And that's why I have put the asterisk there, because if I had to gun to my head, I probably would bet Dennis McCann to win. But like I said, I think there's value in 5-2 there to take a chance on that one.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I like that. And, you know, it's all about price in this game. It doesn't necessarily, if you keep backing value in the long term, you will win. So we like that. Better than a 5-2 chance, we think, Baluta, in what could be a close and an interesting contest. So just to round things off then, you touch on a little acca potentially for this fight night, and you've gone for the ones that you expect to win. So you expect to get this acca up with everything going to plan. You've already touched on the McCann Baluta fight. What about these other two at the bottom?
Yeah, like you said, we've spoken about the two at the top. I will touch more on Dennis McCann just because I do think he will have learned a lot from that first fight with Ina Baluta. He's a great emerging talent. He's since picked up another great win against Brad Strand, who was previously undefeated since the first fight of Baluta. So I think he'll come into that fight in a stronger position, and that's why I will be ultimately backing him to get the win. We'll move on to Moses Atauma, who's fighting Marius Vac. Atauma is heralded as the next great British heavyweight. Many talk about him as being the best prospect in the sport, full stop. There was talk of a long time of him breaking Mike Tyson's record of being the youngest ever heavyweight champion. I don't see that happening now just because of the nature of the sport and the way it's structured, etc., and the political side of boxing. This is, on paper, or at least in terms of a name, a step up. Marius Vac. He's now 44 years old. He's also lost 4 of his last 6, but he's a former world title challenger, been in there with the likes of the Klitschko, or Vladimir Klitschko, I think it was. So again, at least in terms of name value, it's a step up for Atauma, but he will be far too young and far too fresh than Marius Vac. I'll be absolutely stunned if Marius Vac wins this one. And we'll move on to the final one. Ryan Garner.
Can I just push you, Brad? Sorry, just because at the time of speaking, there's no method of victory betting up for Atauma, but you would expect an early stoppage there potentially. If these markets tend to appear on the day, don't they, with the undercard and stuff? So is that one to keep an eye on for people?
Certainly by stoppage. Yeah. Vac has proved his durability. I think he went 10 rounds with Fraser Clark, to be fair, who's not the most aggressive of heavyweights. He's certainly not the hardest hitting heavyweights. I think he's been 10 rounds with Dylan White as well in the last couple of years too. But yeah, I think a Atauma stoppage certainly something worth keeping an eye on when you look at what he's done so far in his career. And we move on to the final fight. Ryan Garner as well, taking on Archie Sharp, a battle of 2 undefeated British super featherweights. Brilliant fight, perhaps the best fight on the card. Certainly one for the hardcore boxing fans. I don't think they don't, like you said, hold much star power in terms of name value to a more casual audience. But I think for the hardcore boxing fans, this is certainly one worth keeping an eye on. Like I said, they're both undefeated, but I just think Ryan Garner is going to be too fresh and active for Archie Sharp. Like I said, in a very good fight. This is probably the one that I'm less certain on, just given, like I said, they are both 2 very good fighters. But Sharp, he's had 2 fights since December now after a long period of inactivity. Neither of them, though, were against high-level opposition, I think it's fair to say. And he did win the last one by the skin of his teeth after being dropped twice in the first round. I think he dug deep and he eventually did enough to get the win that night. But let's say it wasn't exactly a convincing showing. Ryan Garner, meanwhile, is building momentum. He holds a great win over former British champion Liam Dillon last time out. And that's why I'll be swinging his way. That out of the 4, that is probably the one that I'm least confident on. But
it's very tight in that fight as well, just for some context. So we've got a best price of 8-13 Garner, 7-4 Sharp. But it looks a close run affair.
Yeah, exactly that. That is why I think, like I said, it is the one that I'm least certain on. But if I had to swing one way, I'd certainly be backing Ryan Garner just based on the recent outings of them both. I think that ACCA, if all 4 were to come in, it comes in at 1.77 to 1 at 10 bet. Again, like I think all 4 of those fighters that you can see on your screen are the favourites in those respective bouts. But I think there is a little value to be found there if you fancy having a bit of fun and chucking an ACCA on while you're watching the boxing on Saturday.
Definitely, and that Garner fight makes it sound like it might be worth tuning in a little bit earlier than normal then if you're looking for some entertaining fights potentially on the undercard and a chance to see a great prospect in Moses Atauma as well. So that concludes our preview to Saturday night's boxing card. Let us know who you fancy for any of the fights in the comments down below, especially the Joyce Derek Chisora fight. If you enjoyed this video, please do give us a thumb up, and don't forget to subscribe to OddsNow, where we preview all the best sporting events from a betting perspective. We've also got some very exciting stuff coming up in the pipeline over the coming months, so be sure to stick with OddsNow, and we'll see you again very soon. Thanks for watching.